We're going to speak now to Chloe Smith MP, who is Minister for Disabled People, Health and Work. Hello.
Hi, good afternoon.
Thanks for joining us. And you are supporting Rosie Cooper's private members bill. Tell us, how is this going to make a difference to the lives of deaf and hard of hearing people in the UK?
I'm really excited about this bill, and I'm so pleased you're featuring it on the podcast. This is a piece of work that is one of those rare ones that somebody like Rosie Cooper MP can bring as a private members bill, and I'm so pleased to be able to work with Rosie on it. As a minister, you have a combination of things you can do to make change, and sometimes that will be through the big things as government bills, or as the things you do from the government initiation perspective. But otherwise, you can also create a real difference by working with individuals on private members' bills. And so Rosie and campaigners have been fantastic in this case. And what we're hoping to do is really two things, I would say. First of all, it's to recognise BSL as a language, and that is something that I know is incredibly important to deaf people, to the deaf community, to the campaigners behind the bill. So I'm really pleased to be able to do that with Rosie very simply in this bill. And the second thing that we're then going to do with that is create guidance of a couple of different sorts that we hope will really help in a practical way make change for deaf people and for BSL users in how they come into contact with public services. And it's my hope that this will really help people hugely, tangibly in making those public services work better for them, in conjunction with the Equality Act, of course, and that will be something we can all be really proud of through this bill when it becomes an act.
Tell us a bit more about that then, this guidance. How will it nudge councils, GPs, other public services in the direction of providing BSL facilities?
Well, it will provide, one section of the bill will provide, will ask the Secretary of State to provide guidance as to how BSL can be promoted and facilitated. So, for example, that might put greater emphasis on what is needed in a doctor's surgery, or in a school, or in a job centre, even in things that will be familiar to people across the whole range of public services. And it's really important actually that this is in conjunction with the Equality Act, because that's where, of course, you get the real legal guarantee of access, because people are obliged to provide reasonable adjustments, and I really want to support deaf people in having that be a reality.
And for those of us who are a little bit woolly on the parliamentary procedure, where is the bill currently up to?
The bill has passed its second reading in the House of Commons, which is where you debate the general principles of a bill, and that was hugely well received in the case of this bill. Really roundly supported, and I think it's a great example of where you can get cross-party working. After that, we have gone to committee stage, which is where you would go line by line through a bill. Now, this is quite a short bill. It's only got a small number of sections. And that's where we've just gone into a bit more detail and scrutinised how we expect the mechanics of the bill to work. And that's where, for example, just this week I was sharing with that committee in the House of Commons that we've got in this bill, we've got the recognition of British Sign Language, we've got the duty of the Secretary of State to report on how sign language is promoted or facilitated in government communications with the public. And then we've got this third section, which is about guidance on the promotion of and facilitation of sign language more broadly. And that's where I really think you'll get best practice, you'll get case studies, you'll get the kind of guidance that will really help in everyday interactions with public services for deaf BSL users, and which will really, I think, be the place where you'll see a particular practical difference.
So what happens next, and what do you expect the timeline to be?
Well, we hope to be able to see the bill safely from the House of Commons into the House of Lords, and then to Royal Assent after that. And I'd very much like to see all of that done inside this session of Parliament. There are technical reasons why we need to work to that timetable, so that is just the next couple of months. As was said quite a lot actually during second reading and committee stage, Rosie Cooper has done a great job in being able to get this far with a private members bill. It's rare that this happens, so that's why she and I and many others are really pleased and proud to be part of this moment that's come good. And that is where you get cross-party consensus. That is where you get campaigners able to achieve something. It's for that reason that I know Rosie has been particularly keen to, if you like, keep it simple. Keep it simple, stupid is the old acronym, isn't it? And she'd be the first person to say that about this bill, because you can concentrate on being able to get change that can make a difference without overcomplicating it, if you like. And we really hope that is what's going to be able to make tangible change for deaf people and BSL users within the next few years. That's what I think the timeline will be overall. Passing the bill inside the next few months, I hope, into an act, and then within the next few years you'll start to see evidence of those things making a real difference, because you'll have the guidance in place, in operation, and more besides. The more besides, actually, Geoff, is really important, because there's more things we're going to do in addition just to the legislation, in addition to the words on the page. I've made a promise to Rosie and to Parliament that there's a package of measures that I want to put in place alongside this bill, and that includes having a board of BSL users who can give the government advice and thoughts on what needs to be involved in the guidance here, and on other matters to do with BSL as well. There's more we want to be able to do to increase the number of BSL interpreters, which is a genuine issue here. It's all very well wanting to promote and facilitate the use of BSL, but part of that naturally is needing to be able to have interpretation when it's needed. So the number of interpreters is very important. In addition to that, further, there's more I want to do with what's called access to work. Now, this is a fund that is there to help disabled people in the workplace, or indeed disabled job seekers as well. And that is something that I really would like to get the message out about, including through this podcast. It's already a fund actually which helps, of which around half actually goes, half in terms of financial value, goes towards supporting deaf people, because it goes towards the cost of interpretation, the cost of an interpreter to support that deaf person. So it's a really valuable thing, but I think there's even more we can do through that. And finally, the last element of this non-statutory package that goes alongside the bill is that I want to do more through the National Disability Strategy. Now, this is a separate piece of work. It's a very wide-ranging piece of work. It contains over 100 commitments that are geared towards improving everyday life for disabled people. But as part of reporting back on that piece of work, as part of the next year of that piece of work, I want to see what more we can do to support BSL and deaf people as well.
So given those ambitions, and I appreciate what you say about the approach that Rosie's taken, and I also think that the public like to see cross-party work on these things, would a piece of legislation not be better originating from your government department, because that would strengthen it, and obviously you would be able to include spending plans or costings in a way that isn't possible with a private member's bill?
Well, if you like, that's now a hypothetical question, Geoff, because we're doing it. You could go back to at any time and if you like argue, well, could you have done this a different way? But the fact is, we're doing it in a way that I think will be really effective. And actually, just on this point about cost, the point here actually is that any such cost, any cost involved with promoting or facilitating BSL, ought already to have been included in how public services use the Equality Act, and how deaf people or any disabled person should have protection that accrues from the Equality Act. So in a technical sense, if you say to me, well, what are the costs of this legislation as you bring it forward, or what costs should public departments account for now that this legislation is in place, the answer actually is they should be doing what is already there through the Equality Act, and should be accounting for it that way. So actually, I think the cost question, if you don't mind me saying, is slightly a red herring with this bill. The fact is it works hand in hand with what's already there in the Equality Act, and I think together these are good approaches that, as I say, I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to work with so many inside and outside of Parliament to bring about.
Do you see this bill having any impacts in the private sector? Do you think it could do anything to encourage employers to consider facilitating BSL?
Yes, I do, in a number of ways. First of all, as I've just been making the argument there, actually, the Equality Act already applies, of course, beyond the public sector and into every sphere, and I think that's essential. Secondly, the importance of Clause 1 of this bill that recognises BSL, I think will go much wider than just ministerial departments. The technical specification in the bill is that applies to ministerial departments, but it will have a symbolism that goes much wider than that, and I really welcome that. And finally, I think also the guidance that we will produce, that again technically is specified to apply to public services, can also be just as powerful in a wider context. There is absolutely nothing stopping anybody, you, me, any person listening to this podcast, picking up that guidance in due course and saying, oh, great, there's a really powerful case study that explains to me how life looks from the perspective of a BSL user or a deaf person, and I'm going to make sure that applies in my organisation, in my workplace, in my shop, in my sports centre, you name it, what have you. And I think that could be really, really powerful. So that's why there's, again, a really good thing going on in this bill, because it's brought these matters to a head and it's creating a vehicle that will, I think, be perhaps much more valuable than just the words on the page.
And from a personal perspective, I read that you'd started learning BSL after seeing Rose on Strictly.
I've dipped my toe in the water. I wouldn't at all pretend to be any more expert than that. But I think it is important, as the Minister for Disabled People, to do what I can to walk in others' shoes, to understand others' perspectives. That is, of course, a critical part of me doing this role. And so I wanted to, as I say, just begin to understand a little more about British Sign Language. And the opportunity of seeing Rose Ayling-Ellis on Strictly Come Dancing, I think, is a really powerful thing. I think you've seen actually thousands, if not millions, of people across the country be inspired in that same way. She's been a really fantastic role model. Many in the deaf community, I think, would say that themselves. But many beyond the deaf community have seen for the first time what it means to be, or in a little small way, what it means to be deaf. That moment when Rose and Giovanni stopped the music, and for 10 seconds they carried on and others were unable to hear. That's the effect they created. I mean, that was really quite something. But also, of course, what you've actually seen is a many 1,000% rise in interest in BSL because of Strictly. And I can tell you that figure from the expressions of interest that various campaigners and charities saw in BSL classes, BSL tuition. So all round, Rose has been fabulous, and I'm just a small cog in that wheel of having been a little inspired by her to learn more and do more.
Well, hopefully this bill will continue that visibility of BSL beyond just what's on the written page. Chloe Smith, Minister for Disabled People, Health and Work, thank you so much for talking to us.
Thank you for asking me.